In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the two terms of Andrew Jackson's presidency. The election of 1828 ushered in a new era in American politics. We can see from the map that Andrew Jackson got the states in orange, which means he got a lot of the frontier states. Andrew Jackson was born on the frontier and viewed as a common man and related or developed that relationship with regular folks. I should say regular folks identified with Andrew Jackson. This drawing from Jackson's inauguration day shows that. And a big reason that Jackson got elected was that the property owning requirements to vote had been eliminated between the 1824 elections and the 1828 elections. So regular folks were now able to vote, and they voted largely for Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was a Democrat, and he did a number of things as president that we're going to talk about here, not the least of which is the spoils system. Jackson basically, as president, got rid of individuals that had held long-standing government jobs and put his own people into those jobs. This system now was known or became known as the spoils system, which comes from the expression "to the victor goes the spoils," which you can see on the cartoon base of the cartoon here, which means that the winner gets the fruits of victory, if you will, which in this case for Jackson meant giving government jobs to folks that had helped him get elected. All right, the cartoon, as we can see here, shows this negatively in that Jackson is riding a pig, and he was being a pig, if you will, by getting rid of the folks that were in those jobs and putting his own people into those positions. Either way, it did expand government service. A negative of this was that the people that got the positions that Jackson put them in were not necessarily qualified to do the jobs that they were given. Okay, with the Trail of Tears, we have to talk about Jackson's policy towards Native American Indians. All right, in 1830, the Indian Removal Act was passed, which authorized the president to basically move the Native Americans that were east of the Mississippi and put them west of the Mississippi, opening up the lands that they were on to settlement by Americans. The Cherokee Indians in particular actually used the American judicial system to their advantage. They sued in court, and you can see at the bottom here, Worcester versus Georgia is that Supreme Court case where the court actually decided in their favor. However, Andrew Jackson famously said that, if the court wanted to issue a decision like that, then the court itself could enforce the decision, in that Jackson had no love for Native Americans and no interest in enforcing that Supreme Court decision. The result is, since the Cherokee were unwilling to leave willingly, Jackson is going to order the military to move the Native Americans, the Cherokee, I'm sorry, in particular, from their homes in North Georgia. Let me see if I can, there we go. From their homes in North Georgia, which you can see here, across to what was known as the Indian Territory at the time. Today, you know that better as Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma. The result, this was a forced march. You see the arrows in red. Through the winter, 1,000 miles, and several thousand of the Cherokee are going to die on this forced march along the way. And this became known as the Trail of Tears. Jackson was a fan of smaller government and limited government. He particularly did not like the National Bank. So when the bank itself came up for rechartering, he vetoed the rechartering of the National Bank, which meant that it had to close. We can see from this cartoon, where Jackson is dressed like a king, that this did not go over well with the bank's supporters. The cartoon shows Jackson holding the veto of the charter of the bank in one hand and essentially trampling on the Constitution with the other. However, this was within Jackson's powers as president to veto bills passed by Congress. But this would lead to the permanent division, permanent political division in the country. In other words, political parties weren't going anywhere. They were going to remain a permanent part of our political landscape. All right, let's move on to the theory of nullification, which occurred during Jackson's presidency. And this is a little bit complicated, so let me take you through it. Essentially, there was a tariff that was passed actually prior to Jackson's arrival or inauguration as president. Jackson would win the election of 1828, but be inaugurated in 1829. A tariff, as you already know, is a tax on imported goods. And in this map, we can see that the green states are in favor of the tariff and the red states or pink states were not. This corresponds directly to the industrial states, all right, or manufacturing states favoring a tariff, and the agricultural southern states being against the tariff. Let's take a look at why. Here we see, if we're looking at the northern states, which again rejected the tariff, were in favor of the tariff, we see here that a tariff is going to make foreign goods more expensive, which will encourage people to buy United States-made goods. As a result, northern industries are going to profit. However, when we take a look at the southern perspective of the tariff, we do see that foreign goods are made more expensive and people are going to buy more U.S. goods. What we see here that's of concern to Southerners is the third bubble down, where European countries are going to retaliate by buying less Southern cotton. In other words, if we're going to tax their goods coming into the United States, those countries, namely Britain in this case, are going to turn around and tax our goods entering Britain, which was significantly Southern cotton. So this was going to make Southern cotton more expensive in Britain, and in theory, British merchants would look for other countries from which to buy their cotton. On top of that, we can see the purple bubble. The Southerners were going to continue to buy European manufactured goods, and this was now, of course, they were more expensive because of the tariff. And this is both ways, through selling Southern cotton to Britain and buying European-made products, some of which from Britain, is going to have a negative impact on the southern states. So the tariff divided the nation regionally, all right, and this is going to lead to the development of what we call sectionalism. South Carolina is going to take the lead with what you see here on the screen in coming up with this idea called the theory of nullification, which basically states that if a state believes the federal government has exceeded its authority, that the states have a right to, basically not to follow the law that had been passed by the federal government, to nullify it or reject it, if you will. All right, believing that it was unconstitutional. And this goes to a topic that we will continue to talk about in the next unit. Federal authority versus states' rights. You know, the states have the rights to do this, the right to do this. The federal government really supreme over the states. All right. Either way, this became a problem for President Jackson to solve, especially again in 1832 while he was president, with a second tariff that was passed called the Tariff of Abominations. The result we see here is that South Carolina refused to collect the tariff and actually threatened to secede from the United States. So South Carolina will secede from the United States after Lincoln's election in 1860, but we really see the beginning of the concept of secession or withdrawal from the United States starting in the 1830s, all right, where we see the division between North and South starting, in this case, over the tariff issue. Later, we're going to expand this division to include the slavery issue, but again, we will talk about that in the next unit. It really starts here with the tariffs of 1828 and 1832. You can see here Congress is going to reduce the tariffs. South Carolina is going to agree to drop its nullification and secessionist talk. All right, so then let's summing up the age of Jackson. We've got an increase in voter participation due to the elimination of landowning requirements. Most of those voters are going to vote Democrat, at least for Andrew Jackson, all right, ushering him into power. All right, Jackson is going to create the spoil system, giving government jobs to loyal supporters, which is actually going to expand access to government jobs. He's going to close the National Bank by vetoing its recharter, and that is going to lead to permanent political parties, all right, permanent division in terms of how the government should be run. The Indian Removal Act. All right, Jackson was a fan of moving the Indians west to the Indian Territory or just any place west of the Mississippi largely, and that's going to lead to the Cherokee refusal to move and ultimately the Trail of Tears. Don't forget about the Worcester versus Georgia Supreme Court case that the Cherokee won. They won the right to stay put, and the president did not uphold that Supreme Court decision. Lastly, we've got the development of sectionalism and the issue of states' rights versus federal authority, which is going to come out over the tariff issue. And then, of course, the states, the southern states, led by South Carolina, coming up with the idea of the theory of nullification, which is not going to come to anything once the tariffs are reduced. That's the Jackson presidency in 11 minutes.